Wasabi guys, welcome back to another Commander deck tech video. This time we have Wulfgar of Icewind Dale. This is a new commander, I believe, from the Dungeons & Dragons Commander Precon decks. He's a 5 mana legendary human barbarian in red and green, a 4/4 with melee. If a creature you control attacking would cause a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So melee just means that whenever a creature attacks with melee, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent you're attacking. So it's nothing really special, it just makes him a little bit bigger. But the real cool part here is that this is kind of another Panharmonicon ability. We see a ton of these all the time now. And this is not my own deck, this is by Master of Kami. Bayo Wulfgar is what it's called. And they say attempting to make this sort of like Winota, but in Gruul. Looking for any advice, especially on the creature side, as I'm unsure of the split. Well, I'm going to have this deck linked in the description below, so if you like it, go check it out. Maybe help them out and give them the advice they're looking for. So I immediately fell in love with this deck because we get a lot of good attack triggers and a lot of good benefits in combat. So starting off here with the creatures, you're obviously going to look for ramp. You have Arbor Elf, Birds of Paradise, Elvish Mystic, and Llanowar Elves. We also get Priest of Titania. We also get Goblin and Archomancer. Makes our red and green spells 1 cheaper. We have Dockside Extortionist to get us a ton of treasure tokens too. We have Bomat Courier. This is our first attack trigger. Whenever it attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. And you can pay 1 red mana to discard your hand, sacrifice Bomat Courier, put all cards exiled with Bomat Courier into their owner's hands. So normally, if you weren't able to double this trigger, you'd only get 1 off of it. It would be slower and you wouldn't really get as many cards off of that if you were to discard your hand and sacrifice it. But with this, if you attack with it a couple times and it doesn't die, and our commander's there, you might get a few cards out of the deal. Destiny Spinner is going to make it so our creatures can't be countered, also our enchantments too. Gallia of the Endless Dance is another attack trigger. Whenever we attack with 3 or more creatures, we may discard a card at random. If we do, we draw 2 cards. So getting this trigger twice is great, especially in a more combat-focused deck, where it's easy to run out of gas, we want to refill our hand. And we have our Robber of the Rich here. Reach and haste whenever Robber of the Rich attacks. If defending player has more cards in their hand than you, exile the top card of their library. During any turn you attacked with a rogue, you may cast that card and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So that's another very powerful one that you get to steal cards off of their deck. We have Vexing Shusher to make our spells uncounterable. Very underrated card in red and green. You have Captain Lannery Storm. Whenever she attacks, we create a treasure artifact token. So getting this trigger twice means we're going to get ourselves 2 treasure tokens. We have Imperial Recruiter here to search for a creature power 2 or less. And then we have Clothis, God of Destiny. I don't believe this is going to trigger our commander. This is just a pre-combat main phase trigger. You exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a land card, you add red or green. Otherwise, you gain 2 life and Clothis deals 2 damage to each opponent. We have Krenko, 10th Street Kingpin. Whenever he attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on him, then create a number of goblins equal to Krenko's power. So that's a really good trigger, because then you're going to get 2 goblins the first time, and then you'll get another counter on it. So then you'll get 3 more goblins. That is a very good synergy there. We have Manglehorn to make it harder for our opponents to play their artifact decks. It enters and it destroys an artifact. We have Tillanali Skin Shifter. Whenever it attacks, it becomes a copy of another target non-legendary attacking creature until end of turn. Then we have Fireflux Squad. Whenever it attacks, you may exile another target attacking creature you control. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card on the battlefield tapped and attacking, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. So it's almost like a possibility storm, but for attacking creatures. That's actually pretty cool, especially if you combine that with tokens. You can exchange some weaker tokens for some pretty powerful creatures. We have Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma. Whenever Goreclaw attacks, each creature you control with power 4 or greater gets +1/+1 against trample until end of turn. So trigger that again, they get another +1/+1. And with Hans Eriksson, whenever he attacks, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and attacking, defending player or planeswalker they control. Otherwise, put that card into your hand. When you put a creature card onto the battlefield this way, it fights Hans Eriksson. And we have Hero of Oxid Ridge. Whenever it attacks, creatures with power 1 or less can't block this turn. So it really gets rid of the chump blockers. That's a pretty cool card. We have Marton Stromgald. Whenever he attacks, all other attacking creatures get +X until end of turn, where X is equal to the number of attacking creatures. If Marton blocks, all other blocking creatures get +X until end of turn, where X is equal to the number of blocking creatures. So that can be really powerful if you get twice that trigger. We have Tectonic Giant. Whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, choose one. We have it deal 3 damage to each opponent, or you can exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. That's really solid as well. I think it's useful getting that 3 damage. If you get to do that twice, that's 6 damage to each opponent, in addition to everything else in combat. And then we have Toski, Bearer of Secrets. I don't think this is going to be triggered, but it's still good if you're playing a combat deck, because when you deal combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. We have Elder Gargaroth. This one is sweet. Whenever you attack with it, you choose one of 3 modes. You get a 3/3 green beast creature token, you get to gain 3 life, or you get to draw a card. We have Goldspan Dragon. Whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell, you create a treasure token, and it has this cool static ability where you get to sack your treasure tokens for 2 mana instead of just 1 mana. We have Colonian Hydra here. Whenever it attacks, you double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So really going to focus on itself here, but if you get that trigger twice, you get to double it twice. That could easily be game over for someone in a single combat. And then we have Neheb the Eternal. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you add a red to your pool for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. There's really nothing outside of a good combat synergy that Neheb is here for. Oren Frostfang. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card, kind of like with Toski. Just here to get us some card draw, we have Kogla the Titan Ape. This one's sweet. Whenever it attacks, destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. So getting to trigger that in additional time is fantastic. And then we get Morag, Fury of Akum. Each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. And if you're able to have several combat steps, getting additional combat phases, with this deck, if you're able to trigger those attack triggers in additional time, you get to do this more than just once in a turn. I think that's probably game over. We have Nacatl Warpride. Whenever it attacks, you put X tokens into play tapped and attacking that are copies of Nacatl Warpride, where X is the number of creatures defending player controls. Remove the tokens from the game at the end of turn. So you double that trigger, you get even more tokens. And then we have Pathbreaker Ibex. Whenever it attacks, it's probably game over. Creatures you control gain trample and get +X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. And then we get another really cool extra combat phase card here, Scourge of the Throne. Whenever Scourge of the Throne attacks for the first time each turn, if it's attacking the player with the most life or tied for the most life, untap all attacking creatures. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So getting that trigger twice means you're going to get 2 more additional combat phases. So getting to trigger all of those attack triggers again means you're probably just going to win in combat. So moving on to our sorceries, we have Gamble here with that crazy artwork. Just to search something up, we have Sylvan Tutor to search up a creature. We have Finale of Devastation, so we could get something like a Pathbreaker Ibex if we want to. Easily win the game that way. We have Shatter Skull Smashing, kind of a way that we get to deal with some creatures. It's just some good removal here. We have Jeska's Will. Get to speed up our deck a little bit. We exile the top 3 cards of our library. We get to play them this turn. And we have Turn Timber Symbiosis. So we look at the top 7 cards of our library. We may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. If that card has a CMC 3 or less, it enters the battlefield with 3 additional +1/+1 counters on it. So it's a cool way that we get to cheat in to play another creature. In our instance, we have Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast to deal with blue decks. We have Veil of Summer to also deal with counter spells. We have Worldly Tutor to tutor up a creature. We have Heroic Intervention for some protection. I like that. And we have Beast Within for some removal, Chaos Warp for some removal, Deflecting Swat to again disrupt counter spells and removal spells. We have some Artifact Ramp here, Chrome Mox, Lotus Petal, Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Gruul Signet. We have Cursed Totem, so we get to slow down those artifact decks even more. We have Thorn of Amethyst to hurt non-creature decks. We have Cursed Mirror, so it enters the battlefield. We may have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, adding to what is already going to be a pretty solid combat strategy. We have our enchantments, Carpet of Flowers to get more mana. We have Sylvan Library. We have Blood Moon. Get a lot of hate cards in here too, I like that. so it's not just a good combat deck. You are going to be bringing the pain. We have City of Solitude, another great way to hurt removal. We have Druid's Repository. Whenever a creature you control attacks, put a charge counter on it. You get to remove a charge counter from the repository to add 1 mana of any color to your pool. So you get to double that trigger too. I think that's insane. We have Rhythm of the Wild. Creature spells you control can't be countered, and non-token ones have Riot. We have Song of the Dryads to render a permanent useless. We have Stranglehold to hurt our opponents who want to tutor. And the lands, you're gonna probably see something more competitive here. Gemstone Caverns, holy cow. Yeah, this person, they really wanted to get off to a quick start. We have Ancient Tomb. You get pretty good mana flexibility in City of Brass, Mana Confluence. So you get some fetches here too. Playing 7 forests and 6 mountains. So let me know what you think about this deck. I think it's really cool. I like the concept of focusing more on a combat deck and giving that a really busted additional trigger ability. But again, this is not my deck, this is Master of Kami, so go check them out on Moxfield. I will have this whole deck linked in the description below. Void here signing off, I will see you next video.